Yet another book about President Trump is about to come out. This one written by his niece, Mary Trump, and it's a tell-all about what she calls a dysfunctional family. The title, well, gives away where she stands. It is called Too Much and Never Enough: How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. Tell me how you really feel. The president's brother sued to block its release. A temporary halt was put on it, but another judge just overruled that, so it should be coming out at the end of this month. Mary says she was the primary source for the New York Times reporting on Donald Trump's finances and taxes, so clearly she knows where some of the financial bodies are buried. She's also the daughter of Fred Trump Jr., the president's older brother, who was admitted both alcohol abuse, and he died in 1981. The book promises to provide a lot of details about the nasty battle over Fred Trump Sr.'s estate, Donald's treatment of his father when he was battling Alzheimer's, and more. Plus, star Washington Post reporter Bob Woodward, the guy who helped break the Watergate story, has a new book coming out in September, just in time for the home stretch in the presidential campaign. Woodward's first book about the administration, called Fear, was loaded with behind-the-scenes revelations about the chaos at the Trump White House. And the man on your screen, retired General H.R. McMaster, has a book forthcoming before Election Day. He is one of Trump's national security advisors, and he obviously had a lot of access to the president. It's a good bet my next guest will read all three of those books. As she says, she's poured through just about every memoir written by former Trump officials, except, I believe, books by Scaramucci and Amoroso. The Mooch was there for 11 days, and Amoroso, well, that's Amoroso. Laura Miller. She is a books and culture columnist for Slate, and she's kind enough to give us a few minutes. And did you take this job willingly, to go through all the books? Are you just a masochist? What drove you to go through a recounting of this 3.5 years that felt like 35?
Well, I did volunteer for this combat duty, but my editor was so excited when I brought it up just as a sort of, hey, what the hell? Why don't we try this? That I could not really back out of it after I'd committed. So I read a big pile of memoirs by people who had worked in the Trump White House or on the Trump campaign.
And honestly, I thought your piece was fascinating. That's why I wanted to talk to you, because you really focus on what it's like to live in Trump world with a little bit of an insight after so many accounts in terms of some of the common characteristics we've seen for this president. But you break him into two groups, and correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, but one is the adult staffers, and I guess you put in there the Mattises, the Tillersons, the Boltons, the McMasters, and then the believers. And it's a diminishing group, albeit, but Spicer would fit in there, Chris Christie to a certain transactional degree, even Sims, who you wrote, actually wrote an unappreciated book. There was a lot in that team of vipers. Do you think those are the two different populations in Trump world?
Well, Trump world is really an alternate reality where the people who work for Trump exist in a sort of parallel universe where everything that he does makes sense and is a good idea. So there's people who are in there who are desperately trying to sort of believe that it all makes sense. And then there's people who are in Trump world who are trying to get something else done, to either protect the country or to achieve certain policy goals. And they see themselves as moderating a president who doesn't really know what he's doing and who is volatile and basically dishonest and who can't read anything longer than a paragraph. This recent scandal about the bounties that Russia was paying the Taliban for American soldiers is a classic example of that. It seems like it probably happened because nobody wanted to talk to him about Russia because he just blows a gasket whenever anyone brings it up. So they put it in some printed material, and he's known to not read. So basically, it's quite plausible that he just never knew about it because no one wanted to tell him verbally, and they could sort of get it off their shoulders by giving him a piece of paper, but he would never read that.
You know, one of the things that you talk about that you found as a common thread in the book is from a management style, it's chaos in there. And some people blame the people that were put in positions that could have created a structure that didn't. But whether they're enablers or it was an impossible job to take on, where you have something that's so void of direction, it leads to that aforementioned chaos. And you talk about that, the president could never get his arms around how there'd be people in there that would subscribe to actual principles or that had a certain commitment. And whatever we think of John Bolton, he believed in certain things. Certainly the two FBI directors he pushed out the door, Comey among them, both of those guys, they believed in a dedication to the rule of law and to the FBI. To Trump, that made them basically aliens. He couldn't get his arms around that, and that was even a confusion you wrote about that Comey distinguished. Trump wanted him to give a loyalty pledge, and he promised he'd give honesty. Trump thought that was the same thing, that it was an honest loyalty pledge that he was getting. And it kind of is a thread line for the last 3+ years.
Yeah, I mean, Trump, the only ethos that Trump really understands is personal loyalty, personal relationships. That's why he can't hear about Russia, because he takes that as a personal dig on him. Anytime Russia is criticized, one, he thinks Putin is his buddy, even though Putin plays him like a violin. And two, any criticism of Russia brings up the idea that his election was not legitimate in some way. And that really, really upsets him, because for him, the election validates him as a person.
In the Cliff Sims book, he talks about how the president would use the term killer and king, but it traces back to, I guess, his late father instilling that in the sons, as those were the highest compliments you could get if somebody called you a killer or a king. To that end, it explains a little bit about his fascination or bromance, with the will, not just with Putin, but Kim Jong-un, in that, he looks at these guys and the totalitarian, regimes they run, and obviously the indiscriminate pain they'll exude as almost, admirable characteristics. And when you see some of the atrocities that have happened, I mean, with the Saudis, or we mentioned obviously even with the unfolding story with Benegate, you can almost understand in his head, well, these are just strong guys using power plays, and if I had my way, I'd love to do it here stateside. You actually, I don't know, I walk away from it not playing pop shrink here, but he kind of admires that.
He absolutely does admire it, and he makes no bones. Like, he doesn't really understand that that's not something to identify with. It was their father, Fred Trump Sr., who would repeat to them every night, "You are a killer, you are a king, you are a killer, you are a king." And that was kind of ingrained into the Trump boys at an early age. But also, I just think Trump is kind of a weakling. He doesn't really have much of a center. I think he's afraid a lot of the time. And so when he sees a despot, he sees someone who's not afraid, and so he envies them, and he wants to be like them, and he wants to be their buddy, and he envies their confidence.
Well, as I said, if people haven't checked it out, go to Slate. It's a really good piece. It gives you a lot of interesting insight to books that have come out when you put them kind of in a macro. Laura Miller, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, when we come back, Election Day, well, it's just 4 months away, and things are never dull. We're going to show you the latest polls, the electoral map, and also some new reporting about just how wacky things are inside Trump world.